Seth, happy Friday afternoon, buddy.
Happy Friday to you, and happy welcome back to America Day for you. I know it's been a couple days you've been reacclimating, but how does it feel to be back in the official studio in
Oh,
the greatest city in the world here, Chicago,
th-
Illinois?
first of all, thanks for the welcome back. Last time we recorded, I was in a very small Airbnb, right where you open the door and the door hits the bed. It's one of those, very European style
Intimate.
Airbnbs, very intimate. That's the right word. And so happy to have reliable Wi-Fi, reliable power, on my computer and whatnot. So all the things we take for granted, that's the whole point of traveling, right? So when you come back, you appreciate the little things. But it's good to be back. I'm ready to have a real pizza, not those Naples style pizza, but
Yes,
the
the thing that the world rants about how horrible it is, Italian pizza. It's just so rough. I'm sorry about that.
I tell you, it's just so overrated, dude. I like to have a block of cheese, in my stomach, after I have a pizza. But
Preferably Velveeta. Yeah, exactly. The
yeah,
cheaper, the
exactly.
shittier, the
I
better.
I want fluorescent colored cheese, man. I don't want that natural stuff. Don't give it to me, Seth.
It's got to glow under a black light, or I'm not interested.
Well, it's good to be back, and especially with this episode because Seth and you and I were talking about this. Is so much material when we're talking about musicians that have crossed over to become actors, or let's say attempted in many cases, because it's not always a very smooth path, as we will go further in detail.
Yeah, historically, I think it's a pretty mixed bag, and it's not inconceivable why so many musicians try to move into acting. I think one thing I was thinking about as we were preparing for this episode is that a lot of musicians, and maybe this is sweeping, but like a lot of them are like theater kids, not always, but I've said this before, or at least like, the more classically trained musicians that get into rock music often have more of like a theater or a performing arts background. So it's not like you're taking, we do have some in here that qualify for this, but it's not like you're taking guys from the Sex Pistols and like throwing them into a movie. It's a lot,
Yeah.
the people who are successful are usually fairly well-rounded, singing, dancing, acting, etc. So in terms of kind of like growing their career, for a lot of musicians, I think it is the next step, and it feels like the most adjacent opportunity in entertainment. Like, okay, if you already can sing,
Yep.
and people already know you, is there an opportunity to take that charisma and translate it to a movie or a show or whatever? And sometimes it works pretty smoothly, and then sometimes you understand why it's much better to have someone write your lyrics beforehand or write your own
Yeah.
rather than try to act and emote in a way that a normal human would. So we've got a real mixed bag here, but it doesn't shock me that this is the path that a lot of musicians take.
Not at all. And when I was doing my research, there was one example with John Travolta, right? And they said he had the triple threat, which he had the dance, he had the acting, and he had the singing. And I don't really know too much about his singing career, but it was definitely a concept when you're at these early stage, performance schools, if you will, performing arts. So as you said, it's not like taking an accountant and being like, okay, man, you got to get up on stage and sing a rock song.
Yes.
But I thought it was, as looking through the history of this, and even those that have performed on the good side and on the bad, it was interesting to see how those that are so insanely talented on the music side, i.e., a Paul McCartney or a Mick Jagger, and then you put them on a stage in terms of theater or acting, and how it can be so unpredictable. I did not see. I tried to find some type of formula, but I know you wrote down some fundamentals here that why some are a little bit better than others in terms of making that crossover.
Absolutely. And thinking about your question a bit of like who succeeds, who doesn't, I know I've heard this. This is was a random reference, but Stone Cold Steve Austin, the wrestler's famous thing is the best personalities in wrestling are those who are able to take their own personality and turn it up to 11. And I think for a lot of musicians, that's more or less kind of how they present themselves, where they've got, they're writing the music. So it's often from their perspective. And so their stage persona, their offstage persona is really just themselves, or what they perceive to be like the best or coolest version of themselves. So this is a character that they've cultivated, for lack of a better way to say it, across their whole career and even across their whole lives. And so when you suddenly hand them a, hey, okay, now you're not a rock musician, you're a farmer, and they don't have that the capacity to move between characters, and it's not an easy thing to do. So I'm not knocking it, but I think even some of the most kind of flamboyant musicians are able to play one note, but no pun intended. So in terms of it, kind of like what makes it work and what doesn't, the three things I talked about here on our paper are, the first one is the most obvious, is just talent. Is, do you have the ability to inhibit what's the right word? Inhabit another character and kind of transform yourself into them, rather than just sort of saying yourself doing an impression of something. It's a very hard thing to do, and not everybody has it. But that's a core piece. Some can overcome it, many cannot. The second one, I think, is likability. There are certain musicians that just have, I guess the right word is like charisma, where you're drawn to them. You whatever they do, you want to lend an ear to it. And some people, both acting and musicians, just have that inherent charisma or likability. And so I think you're willing to give them a wider berth as a performer if you already like them and you're inclined to like the work that they do. And so I think that gives you a bit more room to play around versus someone who maybe has made their career being an unlikable person. If you've already got a preconceived notion of who they are and what they do, it's very hard to break that. Or if they're a really nice person and they've got a good reputation in music and then they play an evil character, sometimes your brain can't wrap itself around that. So there's something about kind of like having likability / overcoming preconceived notions about who you are and how you present yourself. And then I think the last piece to me is just authenticity, which maybe ties into the one before it, where you like to think of your musicians for the most part as very authentic and kind of who they are, the stories they present, the people they are. This is not a put on. This is maybe a little bit of a character, but like I said, it's a turn up version of yourself. And so if you have a tough time overcoming that, and you're like, well, it doesn't make sense to me that this, British rock musician all of a sudden is playing like a Harvard professor. That doesn't feel authentic to who they are. And no matter how good they are at it, I can't break my brain to give them the credibility to do that. So I guess the second two are tied into each other. But to me, those are the things that are often, on trial when someone tries something new. I think that those are the things you think about. How about you?
I think your last point to me really resonated. It's almost the more authentic you are to your, let's say, true nature, and that's how you present yourself on stage as a musician, then to go to almost a 180 role, right? Take someone like Bob Dylan, who has a very unique stage presence, right? Charismatic in a very unique way. But when he went on film, they said it was almost catatonic. Like it just didn't. He couldn't break out of that character. So in a way, it's like you're hindered by your own benefit.
You know what I mean? You can't overcome your, like, the thing that makes you mysterious and interesting as a musician makes you difficult to understand. It's the same way, like, this is a weird way to say it, but if you ever see a stage actor, someone who's really stage trained in a movie, they often feel like they're overacting. They often feel like they're overly theatrical, their movements, their voice, their singing, the way they emote, because it's inherently a different thing. Like on stage, you need to have the person 100 rows back understand how you're feeling, and that's different than when you've got a camera in your face. Now, I think musicians are the same way, where, like I said, what feels mysterious sometimes, it's just like, wow, this guy has no personality, and it doesn't work at all. So being able to balance those things, I think a lot of musicians, their most successful roles are, so like Lady Gaga and A Star Is Born comes to mind. Like she's functionally kind of playing something close to herself, which is why it's so compelling, because it's a person you already know kind of doing a take on that. And so I think the most impressive performances are often things that are totally out of character, but still work because the person is either taking it to heart or just has such charisma that you're willing to believe it.
Yeah, it just has that talent. I think that, as I mentioned earlier, it's been amazing. We look at someone like Paul McCartney or Mick Jagger, top of their game per se. But with Mick Jagger, when he went into movies, it wasn't believable, and it just was. To be honest with you, and I saw his movies performance where he actually plays a rock star, and then his Western, and it just wasn't. It seemed just like Mick Jagger, Like,
I was just gonna say, there's certain people, and he's a great example of like he will, no matter how much makeup you put on him or
yeah,
whatever role you give him, he'll never be able to overcome his Mick Jaggerness. Right?
that's it.
He's so it's so in his bones that it's impossible to get someone to see anything else. But why is Mick Jagger dressed like a cowboy? You know?
And I agree, and that's the part I was saying. They're so in, it's almost like a brand, whatever. You can't reposition it. It's like they're so ingrained that. And this is, for example, I've seen many interviews with directors why they didn't want to get some famous actor. They're like, no, they would almost overpower. In this case, it'd be Mick Jagger's Rolling Stones persona overpowers any character that he would play.
Yes.
And it's just, they tried it. It didn't work. Mick Jagger obviously didn't continue on with his acting career, here and there. But one that I found was one of the most surprising examples of one who hit all these buckets was Justin Timberlake. I find the guy can dance, he can sing, and his acting is, I think the guy's a great actor. And I saw him being able to play like in The Social Network. He plays a tech entrepreneur, much different from his background, but very believable. And so I think there's just some that are, I don't know if they're so talented or it's just an outlier. I thought Cher was the same thing, like just brilliant. But in terms of what you were talking about in terms of likability and whatnot, it's I couldn't find a formula. In fact, I couldn't say this person would not be good in movies. It almost seemed random, if you will.
Yeah, and some of it is role choice too.
Yeah,
I think Justin Timberlake is a guy that we talked about the charisma thing. It's just like people want to see him do stuff.
Yeah,
and I think The Social Network was a great pick because it's very different from his persona, but there's also like a vulnerability at the end when you realize like he's kind of for a guy who's talking tough, he is a bit of a wimp in that movie. Like he kind of is scared of whatever, that and I think Timberlake has like sort of a soft side to him that fits when he tries to be tough, but then in the end you're like, this guy's kind of a pussy actually. So like it's and he's able to play that to note really nicely. So I think having a little bit of that range. I don't know that people liked him quite as much in the movie Alpha Dog, and he's not done a ton of acting, but especially his stints on SNL, which is kind of playing a version of himself or being more of a theater type performer. He's clearly got versatility. There's no question about that. So I think that's a great example.
Yeah, and I think it's that's actually a good point. And the comedic role, like Mick Jagger's been on Saturday Night Live many times, and he's actually played some really funny characters. But it's in that vein of like Mick Jagger playing a funny character.
Yes, you need to do, it's the same thing they did with Elon Musk. It's like put Elon Musk in a funny costume, and it's gonna be weird and funny, but like not in a wow, he's really subsuming this role. It's like he just is Mick Jagger in a funny costume, and that's going to be, as long as he doesn't totally botch the performance, that's going to be appealing to people, no question.
Yeah, and I think you said it, the roles, this is where the brilliance of the casting director comes out. They're like, we want to get this musician to play this role because of these characteristics, and maybe they saw some carryover. I thought one like with Courtney Love in The People versus Larry Flint. When I first heard about Courtney Love playing in the movies, I was like, oh my God. But when you see it, it actually makes sense. It's like this very tragic character in a way that's kind of wild. So I think they find enough parallels with their current persona or their current life where they're like, okay, this will translate well. Yes. And that could be some type of formula that the studios use that they'll find just enough. I think Lady Gaga, as you mentioned, had just enough where it was believable.
Yes. And I think let's jump into this what we're calling the good kind of artists who have had a really successful transition, running through talking about a little bit of their experience and maybe why they were successful. So I think Lady Gaga is the first one. Star is Born to me is like the role she was born to play, no pun intended. Like she, musician who kind of comes out of nowhere, has a mentor, achieves success. Like that's a home run. And she did an incredible job with the part. But she also is I think she's just like much more of a talented performer than most people gave her credit for, because again, House of Gucci was a ridiculous movie that she was in. Truly, if you see it, it's like it's ridiculous, but she's very good in it.
Very good.
She was in American Horror Story. Like she does have range, And I think she's very smart about what roles she picks and how she can sort of bring her inherent like ridiculous. The reality is she is sort of a caricature on purpose.
Yeah.
And so these big outsized roles, House of Gucci, definitely, American Horror Story, definitely suits her very well, and also allows her to, like, I think more so than many artists, she has been in the vein of Madonna, kind of a chameleon throughout her career.
Yeah.
She can have different looks, she can have different sounds, she's able to slide in and out of personas, and I think that's very conducive to being a successful actress. And like I said, I also think she just picks roles really well.
I think that's it.
Yeah,
I think it's those roles. I mean, some of the other ones that I had in her, Ice Cube, which was in the Friday series or franchise. I just found him, I wouldn't say good enough. I thought he was really good, just very believable. Yeah, and it was definitely the roles. We haven't seen him play like a ballet dancer and in Shakespearean times and whatnot. But I was just impressed. I guess that was more of a surprise than maybe a good.
Yeah, and it's the sense I get with Ice Cube is that he's very self-aware of people's perception. I remember this guy was like, he was in NWA, right? Like he was the biggest gangster rap group in the world. And now he's in movies like Are We There Yet?, which is like a family camping comedy.
Yeah.
So like, and I think he knows that that's a weird contrast for people who know his career to have to be like a dad with a family. And frankly, that's probably a little closer to his life now than anything he was talking about in NWA. But I think for him, he's obviously got great comedic timing, and he's aware what makes his personality engaging to people, and he's willing to kind of play to that a little bit. So I think he's definitely got the comic timing that you can't teach. And it's more about like not dramatic deep acting, and more just like I'm gonna really flip people's perception and be on their heads and do it in a funny way. So no doubt he's been successful about that for quite a bit sometime. And I think now for younger people, he's more famous as an actor than he is as a musician, which is crazy, but it's a reality.
Yeah, you almost say the same thing about like Ice-T, that most people, younger people, know him as on the crime
guy on SVU. He's been on SVU for, I looked this up, for 22 years. He's been on the SVU.
Yeah, and you can't imagine when I see him rapping, I'm like, I have to remember, I'm like, oh yeah, he started off as a rapper, and not even a rapper, but like pretty gangster rapper guy.
Totally. And I know you appreciated his work in Leprechaun 5 in the Hood.
Oh,
so I know he's got an incredible IMDb, but that is the shining star, I would say. So
that was close to Godfather, or definitely a Spielberg production. But people
do call it the Black Godfather. I've heard that before. So.
Dude, I'm telling you, everyone, go see Leprechaun in the Hood. It's good. One, as I mentioned before, Seth, one that I was so impressed with on this list is Cher.
Yeah.
And this is, I mean, Cher, you could almost call her like an entertainer, right? As a singer, I didn't find her voice particularly powerful, like a Linda Ronstadt or a Stevie Nicks. But she had hit songs in the 60s and 70s. But it was really her acting, in Mask, which she played the mom of a deformed child, or Moonstruck, based in New York. I mean, she was brilliant. Honestly, like believable and just really engaging to watch. So, part of it's like, what is her true? Like, is she more of an actor than a musician? And, or would you say just a straight up entertainer?
Yeah, I think entertainer is the right word. And I think back to, what did she really get famous from? It was less so even the songs themselves, but remember, she hosted a variety show with her husband, with Sonny Bono, right? And singing partner, for a handful of years in the, I think, late 60s, early 70s, when they were performing all of their songs, but they were also performing in sketches and interacting with guests. And so I think she kind of had that like jack of all trades built into her. I had read an article that when she took, I think her first role was Moonstruck, like her first proper movie role. And people were very skeptical because at that point she was 80s, dancing on the aircraft carrier and If I Could Turn Back Time video, kind of big hair, outsized persona, and then she won the fucking Best Actress Oscar. Like, it's crazy. I think that's
and well
impossible
deserved
to understate, and well deserved. And I don't think anybody challenges it now because it was an incredible performance. But that doesn't come without talent. It doesn't matter how good the casting is. You've got to be recognized by a body like that. You're for real. So no doubt that's on the Mount Rushmore of actors or musicians turned actors.
Definitely. One, I mean, Will Smith. who
Yeah.
I'm not a particular fan of, and that's not because of his recent activity, but um, went from a successful rap career, right? Kind of more goofy. It wasn't, I wouldn't take it very seriously, but I think this guy is truly like the definition of an entertainer. His goal is to entertain. His goal is to do big ticket items that will appeal to a mass audience. And I think people find him good enough. I wouldn't say he's.
I would say more. I mean, the reality is, I'll say a couple things. First off, it's crazy that he wasn't ever planning to be an actor. And Quincy Jones approached him about doing Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, which he took because the advance he got from the show paid off his tax bill. He had like screwed up on his taxes, or his accountant had. So he took the show as an alternative revenue stream. And literally for 15 or 20 years, Will Smith was, maybe not quite is still, but was the biggest movie star in the world. His movies, just
Huge.
the ones he starred in, not counting where he was kind of part of the cast, movies that he is the leading star in, have made $6.5 billion globally and counting. So this guy is
no joke,
as honest to goodness a movie star as you can get. And he started off as like a novelty rapper, essentially. And I don't want to undermine his music, but this is not the path I think he envisioned. And he was like the most A+++ list actor in the world for about 15 years. So another one that's definitely on the Mount Rushmore.
Now let's get into some of those that were maybe not make it on the Rushmore. Maybe not necessarily horrible, but definitely not immortalized. And there's a lot. I found this list very extensive, and this is where I think you start to see the breakdown, or that nonlinear path where it just does not translate. The charisma does not translate. Madonna.
Yeah.
Okay in some supporting roles, A League of Their Own and whatnot, but as she kind of went as the leading lady, it just was not impressive. That's just my opinion. Again, insane amount of talent, but I think it was more towards the marketing and more of that side of her career as opposed to the actual talent, the functional talent, like singing, like her voice, or her exact acting. And I think it's hard to market on those movies when that skill doesn't come through. It's harder to generate that demand.
Totally. And I think the movies that League of Their Own is a good example where you're getting her in small doses, right? Where she's she's the fifth or sixth person in the movie, or maybe even lower. And then a movie like Evita, which is functionally a musical, right? Like she's acting and she was good in it. But I think where she carries the movie is being able to sing and being able to have like a hit song from it that carries people's opinions over with the movie. So I agree. I think not horrible, but very mixed results. The other one you have on this list, I think, is worth discussing because maybe not great. It sort of is like the birth of this whole crossover universe, which is Elvis Presley, right? Elvis.
Yeah.
Here's the guy where he was so famous that they're just like, how do we give people more Elvis, and how do we give people a reason to buy more music? And truly, I mean, Elvis had, I don't remember what the number is, but it's like 17 movies in like 10 years. All really just built to sell soundtracks. And he, like you said, he did not a lot of speaking. It just be Elvis and sing half your lines.
Exactly.
And just like that was to me a showcase of his musical talent, and didn't ask much from him from an acting standpoint. He did just enough. I don't think he could do a dramatic. But he's another, that's a little Mick Jagger syndrome, right? Too. Like, can you imagine Elvis just being like a random guy in a movie?
Yeah, that's it. It's just, it's beyond him. It's almost one of those that are like, you're too big. We can't translate this. You would have to get some facial surgery. We'd have to shave your head. You'd have to become unrecognizable. And then it's really not Elvis anymore.
Yes. I'm trying to remember. There's I need to think about it for a minute. I just heard this and I wish I could remember, but he was up for some role in a movie in the late 70s. And he died while it was in pre-production. And it would have been a weird, like if it would have been a really weird leap for him. Unfortunately, he passed away before he was able to take it. But that would have been, maybe had he survived, the next phase of his career would have been doing kind of weird roles like that, but he never quite got there. He was still too Elvis-y when that came
Wait,
out.
it wasn't Jaws or Star Wars, was it? He wasn't playing Luke Skywalker.
That would be incredible. I'm not even going to do an Elvis. I'm not even going to do Elvis impression, but I want to so badly.
Captain, Chief Brody of Jaws. We're going to catch this fish there, Seth. Come on now.
We gotta look at the eyes, man. You gotta look at
That's
the
a big
eyes.
ass fish.
Okay, I guess we are going to do an Elvis.
Yeah, we got it. Okay, the other one here, and I didn't want to break your heart, Seth. I know you're a huge fan, and I'm a fan as well. Paul McCartney.
I agree. Yep.
Paul McCartney.
Yep.
Okay. There was a bomb that he did, and we talked about this in Big Artists and Big Fails with the Magical Mystery Tour. And then in the 80s, he decides to do a film, Give My Regards to Broadway. And I don't know if you've seen it, but I can't tell. This is where it's like, is it so random that it's good, or is it just bad? Because he's acting in it as well. It's not only directing.
Yes, it's actually it's called Give My Regards to Broad Street is what it's called.
Sorry,
just in case people you're good. Just in case people want to look it up. But it's like he wrote all the. I mean, this was like, who the fuck's gonna tell Paul McCartney no at this point? You know what I mean? Like, this is kind of post Beatles, post Wings. What is it, like 82 or something, Scott? Does that sound
I think
right
it was
to you?
a little more mid 80s.
Okay,
anything. Yeah,
but it was a time when sort of, I think, maybe the musical or that phase of his musical career was winding down a little bit. He was looking to do different things. He had written some scores for movies and things like that, and wanted to dip his toes. But I think he was truly, just like you said, not only did he act in it, but he directed it and he wrote all the music and performed all the music live, like, while the filming was being done. It was this very weird, high concept movie that made no sense unless you were on a ton of cocaine, is the only thing I can say. Like, it's just such a weird, it's like a period piece. I don't even know what to say. Yeah. But he was, in terms of acting, he was the one and done. And as a Paul McCartney fan, I'm perfectly fine with that.
Yeah. And that's what I find so funny, because in the music, he's near genius status, right?
Yeah.
And so it's one of those that he's genius in a very, very specific function.
Yes.
Where, someone like Cher, as we said, it was amazing, maybe not the best singer or whatnot, but just an entertainer, and then happened to pick these roles that were just perfect for her. But I think you really, to me, it taught me the respect of people like Cher or Justin Timberlake, that it's difficult to do.
Yes, you can be immensely, and I'm sure, listen, I don't blame Paul McCartney for saying, hey, I've kind of done all I can do in music. Maybe not literally, but it's like, there's nowhere to go but down for me here. What else is out there for me? How can I challenge myself?
Yeah.
And the reality is, he had a lot of rope to challenge himself, because people are like, hey man, if you want to do it, do it. But it truly, it shows that there's really talented people out there whose talents don't translate. And so for those who do, it should only reaffirm that. And he is not the only Beatle to have this issue. Scott, would you agree?
Oh, we got our boy Ringo Starr in Caveman, which Ringo alone should just been like, lucky, man. Hey, I'm just happy to be here. But he had to go and try to make a movie. Not the greatest movie.
He made a few. I mean, if you remember, for those who watched the Beatles documentary that came out last year, the whole deadline of doing that album was because Ringo had to go off and shoot the movie The Magic Christian. So the Beatles album was dictated by Ringo's like random rinky-dink movie he was going to do. So he definitely took a crack at the acting thing a few times. And I think even self-admittedly, you have this quote here. He said, I was too busy doing other stuff, and I realized there's enough actors. I'm a musician. So I think that says it about right. I tried, I gave it a whirl, but you know what? I'm going to go back to my lane.
And you got to give him credit. I give credit. Obviously, these people are immensely successful and talented. So it's all in good fun. Leading up to our final section, which is the ugly. And this was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun to read the reviews of some of the movies here. Number one, Mariah Carey, Glitter.
Yeah, all time bomb. But again, just someone who's just no one's going to say no to it. Also, not to get morbid, but it also like came out the week of 9/11, so it was like just a tough time to promote what is inherently a bad movie. And again, that's even worse, because she's sort of playing herself, and so she should be well positioned to do that, and she just has no chops in terms of acting. She's like what do they call her in this? Yeah, the acting range of a parakeet. That's
yeah.
a rough it's a rough break.
There's a lot here. We got just a couple minutes left, but there's some, and we didn't want to add this to be a hating session. That's not what D-Side Stories is about, but we do want to have a little fun.
Not on
with
the
this.
air, at least.
We got Jennifer Lopez and Jilly. And in fact, one of my good friends was in finance at DreamWorks, which financed this movie. And he said it was his biggest career challenge to try to move the books around, to
was that for
move the
Geely?
numbers around. Yeah.
To
try to like, well, where do we place the losses here?
That said, on behalf of D-Side Stories, congratulations, Jennifer Lopez and Ben Affleck, for your lawfully wedded vows this past couple of weeks. Geely paid off after all.
Yeah,
so
it really did. And then there's a host of others. There's Adam Levine, who was notably just horrible in the only movie that he played. We talked about Ringo Starr, Mick Jagger, and then we have the pop stars like Britney Spears, Jessica Simpson. Again, this is more just opportunistic. While they're hot, let's get them out on there. How we can get more Britney out there.
Kind of like it's the Elvis corollary a little bit. Like, let's just strike while the iron's hot. What can we put him in? I remember Jessica Simpson being in Dukes of Hazzard. It's just like, just look beautiful for a little bit. You don't really have to act like she, it's a great music video. Don't get me wrong. It was a formative part of my prepubescent years, but not a good actress. Just again, but it's just, how can we get her on the screen and sell some DVDs is really what it felt like.
The Village People even had their own movie, which is just, it's just more cult like. That's all you need to know. Everyone, we'll send the links to that. And then let me just say this: we have a minute left. I'm going to give you my surprise hit. Okay, Seth, this may surprise. Cool as Ice, starring Vanilla Ice. Okay,
go on.
That's all I got to say with the one line where he says, "Drop the zero, get with the hero."
Has that ever worked for you, Scott? Has that line ever worked?
Never, but I keep using it.
Someday. You're actually telling your own girlfriend. Listen, drop the zero.
It's my fantasy to be like the villain, to be as cool as Ice. But well, listen, everyone, we're running out of time here. Again, thank you so much, Seth. You're off to the Sacred Rose Festival, buddy. Go have some great interviews, and we'll see everyone next week.
Awesome. Thanks again, Scott. Good to be back with you.
See you guys. See you, Seth.